welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. I am Aaron, and joined with me, as always, is Dave and Fredo. So, anyway, a little bit different podcast today. We are going to do a watch episode, everybody, because as the Bad Batch is out, we thought it's kind of important to review where the clones came from. And so we're going to watch the Attack of the Clones. All right, so if anybody wants to watch along with us, just queue up Disney Plus or your VHS or DVD or whatever you've got. I don't know, was it ever released on VHS? But to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and we will all hit play on the count of three. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, then play. 1, 2, 3, play. So, everybody, this is Aaron. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. Something wasn't plugged in, so we weren't picking up Fredo and Dave, and we realized it, didn't realize it until we're all in the Chancellor's office and we see Yoda for the first time. So I'll let you go ahead and queue up to that point so you can join the conversation. So it's right when you see the new CGI Yoda in Emperor Palpatine's office, or I guess it's Chancellor Palpatine at that point, but you can pick it up there. So go ahead and fast forward and come back to the podcast.
Yeah, new Yoda. Not puppet, not weird puppet Yoda.
Much improved Yoda.
You know, and yes, and I do have to say that I don't understand about that in the Phantom Menace I understand why they went puppet Yoda, but why they made him so bad. I mean, for a creature that ages to up to 900 years, he's not going to look that different in a 30-year time span. And actually, they said they were planning on doing puppet Yoda until the guy, like I think it's Coleman, I think his last name is, the guy who was in charge of making digital Yoda, he convinced them that, hey, we can do this digitally. So it wasn't going, that's kind of a bad shot of Yoda though, where he's looking all skeptical at the Chancellor. But anyway, it wasn't a done deal that it was going to be CG Yoda.
I find it weird that they go, an old friend like Master Kenobi. It's like, wait, they haven't seen each other in 15 years. And I don't even remember a single scene where he said more than a word or two to Padme in episode 1. But I guess, hey, she remembers him. By the way, continue. Sidebar, and she's going to pop in later. That's Rose Byrne, who's her handmaid in this one. Maintaining the tradition of future famous actresses who started out being handmaidens to Queen Amidala.
So, I don't know.
I think this was my first real warning bell about this movie was the elevator sequence here where the two of them are supposed to have some sort of camaraderie and they don't. And I guess this scene or parts of this scene were shot in post.
I'm glad that you're the one to bring this up because I was just about ready to say this scene bothered me.
Yeah, at the time it did. And, again, as we go further in this commentary, I'm going to really sing a lot of praises for this movie. I think it gets maligned too much. But, yeah, no, like there were certain things right away that you're like, that's weird or not great. It's not well acted, and it's not particularly well shot. You're not getting particularly good exposition. Like I said, it's just kind of a warning bell that those particular things are going to be issues.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting looking at it, even just from that elevator to now when they're all finally regathering, that it feels kind of cold. It doesn't have the warmth that you would expect. That's kind of why I was asking, like, hey, wait a minute, your old friend Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's like, they met once long ago.
Well, so now they could have, Obi-Wan could have had interactions with Padme, prior to this.
Well, but then Anakin says, haven't seen her in 10 years.
Well, Anakin might not have. Yeah,
I guess. Well,
am I the one here trying to plug loopholes?
I
but
guess what my
and
point is,
defend this movie. No, however, I will say that, and we're talking about this today, just in our group chat, that I wish the romance part of Anakin's story was kind of the B story,
Mhm.
because all the things, again, we're watching this because because Bad Batch, and it's like, and we're having that discussion about it's Attack of the Clones, but it's not really about the Clone Wars. And I mean, because the story is about Anakin. But if you watch the Clone Wars series, and I've said it a gazillion times on this podcast, that is a much more believable story as to how Anakin becomes Darth Vader.
Mhm.
And not I fell in love, and and that's really it. I fell in love, and I think she's having a thing with Obi-Wan. Now I'm going to turn to the dark side. I
Yeah.
mean, it's, or I'm afraid of losing her, so I'm going to chop the arm off of Mace Windu. Yeah, I don't know. It was. I wish it would have been more of his impatience, his insubordination, his problem with the council. Those are all that corruption. How he just becomes corrupt. I think that would have been a better story. And
Well, and can I highlight just some right quick as we transition from scene? You know, Obi-Wan cuts Anakin down in the middle of everybody, but then acts all warm and comforting when everybody gone.
yeah,
And it's like, shouldn't that have been in verse? Like, shouldn't they have been trying to quietly, like, hey, let's get you back to kind of where we're at. And when they're alone, they kind of go like, dude, what the heck?
yeah, but in Empire, Ghost Obi-Wan is telling Yoda, that he was not perfect either. So yeah,
Yeah, I totally buy that within character that Obi-Wan's not the best teacher, and he allows for that, and I get that. I guess my bigger problem, I don't have a problem with Ewan McGregor's performance at all, really, throughout any of these movies. It's really sort of that Anakin's so unlikable from the start. And I get they were going for moody teenager.
yeah, emo
Uh,
Anakin, right?
yeah, but I don't know. Like, I think his turn becomes a lot more tragic if you already feel affinity and attachment to his character already. And he doesn't really build any of those sorts of likable traits until the third movie.
Right.
The other, I mean, again, this movie is fine. I don't dislike this movie. Um, but again, I do have other problems I have with it, that it's far too much of a whodunit.
When we know who done it.
Well, yeah, it's far too much of a whodunit when we know who done it. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to fast forward. It's the other thing. I remember being in the theater, and when they, I'm sorry, I'm skipping way ahead to when they mentioned Master Sifo Dyas. And I was like, oh, that's a play on words. They're talking about Sidious. And so it was like Sidious who ordered, but no, it was Sifo Dyas. And it's like, who the hell is Sifo Dyas? And we don't get any explanation whatsoever, and it's like, I don't know. It's like they should have made it like somebody we already knew, or that's the way all mysteries or murder mysteries or Hitchcock things. It's always a character that It's like, oh, it was old man Schmedley behind the blah blah blah. I would have gotten away with
Now,
it too.
I do want to address that point because I feel very strongly that what we were talking about earlier, I think if you had moved these movies around, if Attack of the Clones had been episode 1, you would have had time to pay off those kinds of things.
Mhm.
We're gonna create all these mysteries, like who's Sifo Dyas? What's the deal with Dooku? Where'd that background come from? All right, we're gonna get to see some of the Clone Wars now. We're finally gonna get to see some of the Clone Wars. They would have been able to pay a lot of these things off. And my argument has always been that Attack of the Clones suffers more than any of the other Star Wars movies based on what came after it.
Can I say?
Revenge of the Sith did not pay this movie off in any way, shape, or form, and I understand why it didn't, because they had a time crunch. It was like, well, we got to do the fall of Anakin, and we got to do this, and we got to pay off the romance, the kids got to get born, and all these things. But it's like he painted himself into that corner.
But by God, let's spend 20 minutes fighting a giant praying mantis. You know, I mean,
I enjoyed that, but for whatever it is, and I like this too. I like this sequence a lot. The role reversal of this is nice.
Now, when you're using the kind of the this and those, we're in the scene where Obi-Wan is chasing after Zam Wesell, who tried to murder Padme. So it's that whole hanging from a droid scene.
Yeah. And I gotta say, like, Obi-Wan taking a dive through the window endeared himself to me more so than almost anything else he had done throughout the prequels. I was like, okay, that's
more Anakin.
You're committed to your job.
Yes, very committed to your job. That kind of goes against character or what we would expect, and I really like that about it.
Now, apparently there's a TIE fighter flying through Coruscant. Is that right? During this, and an Enterprise, I think. Like little Easter eggs, I've heard that if you look in the background of all the flying traffic, you're going to see like the Enterprise. You're going to see a TIE fighter. Of course, it might just be matrixing, but
I've never had the patience to sit down and try to pause.
No, I haven't either.
Yeah.
So two things that kind of pop in mind, and I do want to get into kind of what you brought up, Dave, because it's a good point regarding kind of the time crunch that George Lucas built for himself by making episode 1 be so disconnected from everything that happens in 2 and 3. In so many ways, episode 2 becomes another setup movie where you should have episode 1 be set up the characters, episode 2 be the conflict, and episode 3 be the payoff, even if it's, the fall of Anakin, the fall of the Republic, etc. Because you didn't get all of that set up properly, you're cramming all of it in here, and a lot of it doesn't get paid off. Which kind of brings me to kind of the point right now. They're chasing a bounty hunter who was sent by another bounty hunter to murder the senator. And as far as I can tell, his plot that he gave to her was, look, here's this little tube connected to this thing that's gonna to this vessel, is gonna bring it over to her window. The 2 little worms are gonna come out, they're gonna poison her. Right? Why couldn't Jango Fett have been the one doing all that? And the reason is because we got to build the mystery of who Jango Fett is and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Nothing to do with Sam. It's got everything to do with Jango. So because we got to show that, okay, he's willing to kill her, they do that. There's got to be some sort of payoff to all this chase beyond just simply chasing. And it creates a weird dynamic. Why is Jango Fett hiring somebody else? If the plot goes along well, he doesn't need to have another pair of eyes that's aware of what happened.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you. We need to have George Lucas on on the podcast. However, this chase scene, I lose my interest about halfway through it. When we start, right now, it's just kind of about seeing different parts of Coruscant.
Well, they've teased it so much through the little short scene in Return of the Jedi and seeing a tiny bit of it in episode 1. So it felt natural at some point they were going to have to give us a good chunk of Coruscant. Like, we've been telling you about it. Well, here it is. And doing a chase sequence through the skies of it makes sense. I guess, I don't know, I'm not sure about the structure of what the heck the plot is here. They're trying to kill Padme, but they're going about it now.
And I like how her protection, like, just leaves her high and dry. It's like, all right, see you later.
like if he had said, it would have been interesting if they had said, okay, if Jango had hired Zem to take the Jedi away, and then he would have come in from behind trying to take Padme out, And in the middle of all this, the Jedi got a message from what's the name of the new captain? Because it's not
Typho.
yeah, if it been Captain Typho going like, "Hey, we're under attack. Somebody's trying to get in here. Get back here."
See, I'm sorry, I don't like the way they have Obi-Wan behave here, where it's like, you did, bleh. You should have turned that way. Bleh, bleh, bleh. Yeah, I'm so mad. Bleh. And then Anakin, it's just, I don't know. That portrayal of Obi-Wan bothers me.
I think it's very much he's trying to be dad, and Anakin will say later, "Oh, you're like a father to me," but I'm like, you know, the dads don't usually chide like that.
And there's absolutely, I'm sorry, we're running we got to start talking good things here in a little bit, but I'm going to say we just get the reveal that she's a changeling. Zam Wessel, changes form. There's absolutely no reason for it. We get, as we fast forward here in a little bit, it's not going to matter they make it seem like it matters to the story, but it doesn't at all. So I don't know. It's just interesting.
I think it's to make the scene in the sports bar feel more dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't know, you got to watch your back. You don't know where you might catch a laser blast in the back and that kind of thing. But you're right. I mean, like ultimately they don't pay that off. And some of that stuff we talk about Attack of the Clones is like, to me, it's the ultimate tease because it's got so many good ideas and it's got so many interesting concepts. And in a lot of ways, it really swings for the fences, but the execution isn't always there. And I've always kind of likened it to a home run hitter who strikes out all the time, like a Sammy Sosa.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Sammy Sosa of the Star Wars films because the high beats are really, really nice. And you can see what they're going for. They're going for home runs. But they also strike out a lot.
So now I'm starting to like the Obi-Wan character at this point because I love it when, he's just like, cool your jets. She's gone in to hide, not to run away, so we don't need to be running. Then he's, eventually he says, I'm going to go up to the bar. Well, what for? To get a drink. It's like, I don't know, just dig that part of Obi-Wan. But then, of course,
that feels like old school Alec Guinness.
Yeah. But the killer line coming up here is, Anakin, why do I feel you're going to be the death of me?
I always love that line. I know some people groan at it or roll their eyes at it, but to me, it was just so spot on perfect.
So we got, it's kind of like if you had the Mos Eisley Cantina meet Canto Bite. We're kind of halfway in the middle here. This is just yeah.
I was going to say the Cantina meets Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the big screen TVs showing robot football. And in the background, you're going to see Ahmed Best and Anthony Daniels eventually here. So actually, two people, they get to actually show their face.
And isn't that George's daughter?
No.
The Twi'lek?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
it was.
No, I think she's not until episode 3.
Okay.
I'm fairly certain, unless somebody wants to. Oh, we just missed the death sticks. You want to buy some death sticks? You don't want to sell me death sticks. I don't want to sell you death sticks.
For the good of everybody, let's move on beyond the death sticks.
It's kind of a fun thing watching Anakin, who clearly doesn't seem to have any understanding of what's going on around him.
And he sticks out like a sore thumb. Yeah.
And trying to act like the, official Jedi business and everything, and he's just this goofy kid.
Well, and it kind of points to something that's kind of an issue that really comes bigger into focus through the Clone Wars show is how disconnected Jedi like Anakin are from society. Obi-Wan's the rarity. Obi-Wan's the guy who's got friends in low places in the lower levels of Coruscant, who goes to weird places to have drinks, even though he's supposed to be the model Jedi. Meanwhile, Anakin, who's supposed to be the rebel, not really.
Now, here is where you actually start to see Anakin, the dark side of Anakin, when he's like, tell us now, and like he's just that, again, that pissed off, frustrated, just take the quick, easy path and yell at people. That's like I said, that's the Anakin I wanted to see more of. And now we start the Scooby-Doo episode.
By the way, for the record, yeah, that was Katie Lucas.
Okay, I stand corrected.
No name Minx. She actually played a cameo in every one of the prequels.
You ever wonder who actually makes the decisions on the Jedi Council? It always seemed, is it like just Yoda and Mace? Or is it just Yoda? Or, because it's just like nobody ever speaks up or says anything except for Yoda and Mace.
Well, it's always clear that Mace is kind of like the leader of the Jedi, but Yoda is like the senior-most figure. So therefore he gets to kind of have a voice.
Yeah, and and I'm sorry, the Jedi Council has nobody to blame but themselves for Darth Vader. Because they're all just kind of, I mean, as much as a pain as Anakin is, they're not very, they just really don't like him. It's, I don't know. They're just
not good people persons. They're not good people persons. They, how was it? How to lose friends and alienate people? It seems like they took a course in that.
And here, all of a sudden, it's just the Chancellor and Anakin are buddies. It's that wasn't really set up for us all that much. Yeah, maybe a little bit in episode 1. We'll keep an eye on you type of a deal, but
right.
But oh well. I mean, that's the thing though, is that you got to cut it some slack, because like anybody who is of our vintage going into this, we know what's going to happen by the end of episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing we don't know is how Anakin falls.
Right.
So we know he becomes an apprentice to, the Emperor. We know that he becomes Darth Vader. We know everything, but we don't know how. And what do you think about Yoda on his floaty chair?
It didn't bother me. It made practical sense so that the actors could talk to somebody who wasn't like on the floor. But
well, and it's the kind of part that he's missing when he gets to Dagobah. I mean, like, I should have packed the floaty chair.
I forgot to pack the floaty chair.
and he kind of scolds Obi-Wan and Mace there about how it's the older Jedi seem to be a little bit more kind of flawed. I don't know. There's just I can't remember what the exact line is, but Yoda reminds me of my grandma Swoboda. Where it just kind of she would say something, just kind of wink. There was always a double meaning to it. So, and
which is interesting because he's also he excludes himself from the group of people who doesn't see a lot of the issues happening in front of him, because Sidious sat in front of him and he didn't notice him. So
yeah, so
I'd like to acknowledge, since the romance beats here are less than perfect, I'd like to acknowledge some of the cinematography, just the staging of some of these shots and how that's put together. It's so beautiful.
However, did you ever think you'd see a suitcase in Star Wars?
That's just one of those little things, It's like, well, we saw glasses in the Battle for Endor. So I guess
sorry to interrupt you there, but yeah, Star Wars suitcase.
But I think like some of the visual effects in this film don't hold up as well, right? And we've said that about the prequels in general. Mm-hmm. Some of that CGI stuff is just it can be a little tough, and green screen stuff is tough to look at. But
yeah, it was there, but it wasn't quite there yet.
Right. But still, in spite of that, I like to watch this film just for some of the visuals and the music. It's just John Williams, is like does his usual great job. One of his weaker scores out of all 9 of the movies, but it's John Williams. We're grading on the curve there.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's got some really cool things, some cool elements. Again, I think he started losing the operatic elements in episode 3. Like I said, with the leitmotifs and things like that, he just started using clips of the high, of the pardon me, I'm choking on something. But so I really actually dig this, and actually it was kind of funny because when I would teach my high school kids about operatic techniques, I would use the Star Wars saga, and actually episode 2 was one that I went to a lot because when you get into the garage scene and Anakin's getting all torqued off and the Emperor's theme is in behind him, showing that, Faustian, influence. It's so
I think where I would critique it is just the lack of newness here. You have Across the Stars, which is a beautiful piece of music, and then not a whole lot else that was really new. It felt kind of recycled from the first movie, that was my critique. But we're again picking nits because it's John Williams. And back to my original point, which is like, and this isn't an original thought of mine, but I tend to agree with the other people who've stated this. Star Wars can be kind of a silent movie in a way. If you were able to just remove the dialogue and just watch it and listen to the music, you could pick up on what's happening. And I like that about this movie in particular. Of all the Star Wars movies, I feel like this is the movie that kind of falls into that in the best way. I'm sorry, Fredo, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, to defend John Williams even further, a lot of what happened to him in the prequels is a result of the editing by George Lucas, because he was submitting whole scores and then Lucas was chopping and cutting because he was editing right up until just about a week before. They literally had to turn in the master of the movie in order to make all the prints. So he was cutting and chopping up until the last minute, and he cut up and chopped the score to fit what he saw. And sometimes he'd go back and say, okay, I'll just double up on this musical note because I want it to hit again. Or, yeah, that's too long, because, John Williams scoring the whole scene. So that happened all throughout the prequels, but especially here, and even gets even worse in episode 3.
So here we are in Dexter Jetsters. I don't know how I feel about being in a
50s
diner, but one of my favorite memes ever is right here when Obi-Wan says, "Do you know what this is?" and he holds the saber dart, and then it cuts to Dexter Jetster saying, "Nope," and then it's credits because the movie ends if he doesn't know what's going on here. I get it. It's that throwback to American Graffiti, but it's just to see the salt and pepper shakers and do you want some Java juice? It's like, really, that's how lazy you are? Java juice? It's like, I don't know. But and it's Alice's Diner, right? Because we got Mel here, and then Flo was the waitress.
I think the sports bar was different enough for me to not like blanch at it, but the diner never really worked for me super well. It just seemed too.
I would have liked more in the library when he goes to the library here in a little bit. Jocasta knew saying, "Hey, have you seen this?" She's like, "No, I've never seen that before, but maybe you can look up, or yeah, I've read about that on Camino or something." Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes it was like, it almost seems like we need to have another CGI character. Who's it going to be? Hey, let's make this guy Dexter Jetster. I don't know. I don't want to sound like the curmudgeon here, but yeah, I think this was just an awkward scene.
I think this is a good example of what I was talking about, though, where it's like you're going to hit your batting average. you know, and like you're gonna swing and miss sometimes, and I feel like the diner is a bit of a swing and a miss.
And if I can pause for a second, here's another miss: is that he's looking at a statue of Count Dooku.
Right,
And in the book they explain it a little bit. In the book they do, but here, I mean, a little bit of backstory of, you know, just maybe a little back and forth between Obi-Wan and Jocasta Nu, the librarian, about Count Dooku.
Well, they got it. They did. That scene is a deleted scene where they discuss the missing 20. I forget the term of it, but there is a scene where Jocasta Nu and Obi-Wan discuss Count Dooku and the fact that he left, that he was a Jedi, that it was really good and noble, and then he left.
And by the way, she is like every school librarian. Well, if it's not in here, then it doesn't exist. It's like, yeah, you're every school librarian I've ever worked with.
Yeah. By the way, okay, sidebar, because right now we're getting to see the refugee ship on that Padme and Anakin are traveling. Who are these refugees? What are they fleeing?
I think what we're on right now is we're on the Star Wars Greyhound bus.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
Obi-Wan said travel as refugees. It didn't mean that everybody on the Greyhound here was a refugee.
Yeah, I think it's like just, yeah, you get, just dress
that's
down and don't draw attention to yourselves, you know. But
that did confuse me, because at first I was like, wait a minute, refugee transport. Like, oh no, okay, so they're on Star Wars Greyhound acting like they're just two drifters.
I like Anakin here is trying to, you know, say, yeah, I'm a Jedi. I can still love people, you know, wink, wink. It's, yeah, it fits in, right? You know, it's unconditional love, you know. It's like...
It's what the Greeks call agape.
But there are some moments where Hayden hits what the character, you know, that, I mean, he's trying to work his way through the rules to get what he wants, right? You know, he's not evil yet, but well, now we have all the little Padawans. Where's Grogu? Really, Grogu should be in there somewhere.
Somewhere in the, well, you know, they don't let dads teach your kids. Jedi rule, Jedi Academy rule.
So this was all very cute and lovely, and it makes Yoda more endearing. But goodness gracious, where the kid figures it out and Obi-Wan can't, that just drove me nuts watching it in theater. I'm like, come on. Really?
And it's because somebody erased it from the Jedi archives. It's like, all right.
Yeah, we know.
Well, like you said, it's he's trying to present it in a way in which the answer is obvious, except for the dogma they exist with. The dogma Jocasta Nu and the Jedi Master. It's a juxtaposition, kind of going back to the point we've been talking about of, you know, the Jedi are locked into the way they see things.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, it is
the other way.
Yeah.
It is, you know, Obi-Wan is, you know, with age, we always make things more difficult than it actually is, you know.
And Fredo, to your point, I like that interpretation. I mean, that it's an artistic.
Right.
He's a representation of the Jedi in that moment of not being able to unplug his way of thinking.
Yeah, you've seen the forest from the trees. Right.
Yeah,
all right,
exactly.
so I have a question. And I mean, Star Wars is full of there's tons of things. It's like, are the Jedi dressed as people on Tatooine, or are the people on Tatooine dressed as Jedi? We're not going to get into that. But the training remotes that all the little kids are using. So go to A New Hope. Was that in Obi-Wan's backpack that he just brought with him when they went to Mos Eisley, or was that on the Millennium Falcon?
I would say more likely with Obi-Wan, because you got to imagine at some point if he's thinking at some point I may have to train young Luke Skywalker, I gotta have some sort of training equipment here for him. I can't.
All right.
I gotta have some workbooks for him to test, to work out his math problems.
R2D2 going up the stairs is another thing that bothers me.
Well-
We've established he's got jets.
yeah.
Yeah, later on in the movie he does. Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah, they explain it later in the movie. But yeah, no, like I always assumed that was Ben's training thing, because like he needs to train, right? He needs
Right.
his skills sharp. So
Now, it makes sense that once Obi-Wan brought it into the Millennium Falcon and A New Hope, that he just left it there because more important things to do, and that's what Finn found.
Yeah.
Two
Now-
generations later.
Now this scene, I love how Padme makes Anakin like about 2 inches tall. Oh, he's just a Padawan. He's just a Padawan learner. He's not a Jedi. And he's like, I think that is those types of things. It shows Anakin's, again, his impatience, his But then when he's trying to, when we get to the creepy, scene a little bit later, it's where he's trying too hard.
And let me ask this: Do we know if he's been told about the prophecy of the Chosen One by this point? I mean, I don't think it's everybody talks around it and about it, but I don't know if he's aware of it because he acts like he thinks he's the hottest, tough, coolest guy in the galaxy. Watch me twirl my lightsaber, and I'm more powerful than you've ever known. But
yeah, I mean, he's like the cop that has his uniform on for the first time and is walking around, with the gun and a badge and like Wyatt Earp or something. So, I mean,
yeah.
And this is actually his first mission on his own as well, right? Is that's set up in this movie, isn't it?
Yep, it is. It is, and he's flunking it.
All right, so what do you think about the hyperspace rings? I thought that was an interesting little bit of technology that they introduced, because that was always, I remember something we talked about. It's like the TIE fighters couldn't go into hyperspace, certain ships couldn't, and so to give them a little ring that basically it's like the rent-a-bike, that can take you from one end of the galaxy to another. But there is no room for an astromech droid in that ship. None.
Well, yeah, those are separate issues, right? Per the ring thing, I liken it to the pod racer sequence in the first film when you can kind of see on his display when he's losing power and he has to transfer power from one engine to the other. It makes logical sense within the context of what we already know. It's like, oh, that is how they would do that. It's like, I don't know the ins and outs of the technology, but it's like that passes with me. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's a cool little twist on the technology that makes it feel, again, lived in. It makes it feel like some real. Okay, they make it seem like we get the introduction to Lama Su and Nala Se, the two Kaminoans from Clone Wars and Bad Batch, and
no, this is Lama Su and Tan Wee, right?
Tan Wee, okay.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that she goes, "Oh, you're expected," and she goes right away to meet him, to bring him to sit in the weird,
spoon chair,
Apple AirPod chairs, But it's interesting that they know that he's coming. They're expecting him, and they're just telling him flat out, "Oh, here's your army," and like they didn't check his ID.
Well, and speaking of this, is the Obi-Wan here. It's like you're here to see your army. He's like, well, that's why I'm here. It's like he was like me when I was 19 at the hotel bar when we were at the NCAA tournament, and I ordered a beer, and they said, "Now you're 21, right?" Well, yeah, I am.
Exactly.
It's like
or it's like when I met Nancy Pelosi, and she knew I didn't belong where I was as a Democratic fundraiser, and she just looks me up and down and says, "Thank you for all you do for the party." And my answer, without blinking an eye, was, "It's my pleasure." I was thinking Obi-Wan at that time. It's like you just read the signs and play along, and you too can get your way into things.
So to that point of this dialogue being like kind of awkward, and it's like the acting, like again, I love Ewan McGregor in this role, but he's like, that's why I'm here. It's like, okay, it's kind of funny, but how effective of a scene is it on the surface level? It's debatable. Those sorts of creative decisions are really debatable, and we're coming up on a real bad one. But but consider the subtext of that, like Camino itself. It's this ravaging external environment, which kind of itself represents a harsh, warlike galaxy in a way. And yet, the Kaminoans are like sort of safe from that. And that's how they're choosing. That informs what we're going to learn about them later, which is like they are insulating themselves from war by feeding the war machine.
So you just had a really deep thought here, and now I've heard this speculation. I'm going to take us down, not as deep of a thought. However, there's some that speculate that Anakin is playing a Jedi mind trick to get Padme to go along with him.
Interesting. I'd never thought of that.
I mean, because she really goes from, oh, he's just a Padawan learner, and you're just a little boy, to making out on the lake. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I think again, it's an interesting idea. It makes more sense than the actual intention, which I think the intention is she's been hiding her feelings. And because you get no indication of that. None. Which is weird. Because in the first movie, she's all very friendly and kind and warm and welcoming. And now, I get there's a lot on her mind. And I guess you could always go with that explanation for how she's acting. But it's just... and his that line, the sand line, is what does it for her.
Well, and when we start thinking about their relationship, they've just reconnected a few days prior. Okay, they've been on a romantic Greyhound ride, and Naboo by the lake is quite pretty. They want to go back there, but at the same time, it's like this. You've spent half the time cutting him down to size, and the other half time hearing him kind of gripe.
That's why I think it's a really interesting thought and it actually makes the dissension to Darth Vader. It just shows how devious he is if he was to basically mentally roofie her. You know what I mean? It's like to use a Jedi mind trick to get her to go along with him. Boy, we just ruined Star Wars for a lot of people right now.
Doesn't he tell her that later, though? Like, the mind tricks only work on the weak. So like, they do acknowledge it, I think, intentionally, to say, like, no, he didn't mind trick her, but...
Now, not one clone is an actual person. That sounded goofy, right? But they're all CG. They're all CG. And I think you can... And I was saying this about, the Bad Batch. You can get away with that. You can animate people in a robot type armor and get away with it, but animating people is tough. And I really didn't. Again, this is where I think they could have been spending more time on other things than the romance of Anakin and Padme. Have them, you could hurry up and get them to kiss and realize, all right, they are a thing now. They like each other. Good. And let's go on to the other elements of, the war and things like that. But we spend too much time.
I think I know it's not necessarily a mistake. It was Lucas's vision. He was picturing a great romance, a Dr. Zhivago in space. Mm-hmm. But the problem here is he doesn't have the kind of character. Doesn't have the kind of character actors that Dr. Zhivago had, nor does he have necessarily the dialogue that those characters did.
But again, it's like our conversation today. It's he missed his own point. That the whole point of this story is the rise and fall, or the fall and rise, the fall and redemption of Anakin Skywalker. And so it's not about the romance of Anakin and Padme, and that's what episode 2 and episode 3 become, is the romance of Anakin. It becomes Bonnie and Clyde in space. It's this romance, and Bonnie and Clyde's the wrong, one there.
Yeah,
but you get what I mean. It's he lost sight of his own story, I think.
And to support your point, I think it would have made far more better sense to give your limited screen time to the bigger war plot and minimize this plot, as Anakin is riding the weird Naboo cow that looks like a watermelon.
Looks like,
I think it's a dung beetle.
I was going to say the Naboo booby. It looks like,
Exactly. And now they're gonna roll in the. They're gonna have a roll in the hay.
Roll in the hay. Roll in the hay.
Exactly. So I think that you could have, if you were not getting necessarily the emotional beats that you needed, you could have trimmed it somewhat and recognized, okay, here are the big beats I got to give. Kind of like they did with in Empire with Leia and Han. That's not a romance that takes half the movie to set up.
Hey, Dave, I got to ask.
It happens in 3-4 key scenes, and boom, you got it.
Dave, I got to ask you a question. How long you and Kate been married?
12 years.
All right, so Brittany and I are going to be married 25 years here in June. Have you ever once rolled down a hill with Kate?
As you will.
I don't think we've rolled down a hill together.
And why is little Boba Fett so skeptical and pissed at Obi-Wan here? Why does he have any reason to? It's just some dude at the door.
I think that's how they're raised.
They don't get dudes.
Skeptical, angry little kid,
See, and I do not like this back and forth with Obi-Wan and Jango.
I actually really enjoy it.
I mean, I do like the element of it's like we're both saying stuff to each other and we know that the other is, got the other pegged. We both have each other pegged, but I don't know.
It's interesting to me, upon further reflection, that Obi-Wan didn't act. And again, this could be where his training gets the better of him, because he goes and he checks in with the council before he acts, right? I need to go get the council's permission. And then they're like, yes, apprehend this guy and bring him in, obviously. And whereas he was in a position to potentially take him by surprise here and take him.
Yeah.
Well, I also do wonder if he had tried to arrest him right then and there. First of all, if Ting Wei would have allowed him to do so. Or
I don't know if she would have had much choice.
He's an employee there, or so to speak, or a contractor. Obi-Wan's a visitor. So it's not like he's not got any jurisdiction there as far as they're concerned. Not yet, at least.
I think he could have done it. Asked for forgiveness later. That's
more Anakin.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But that also goes to juxtaposition of them.
Can we pause for a second and see? We're seeing Tamura Morrison for the first time. We just saw him, in The Mandalorian. That's kind of bizarre.
Years later.
And this dinner scene of him showing off with cutting the pear and I don't know.
Again, they're trying to ram this great romance down your eyeballs.
They could have had one scene and we would have bought that they were a thing. Like I said,
I will encourage anyone who's not seen the deleted scenes to check them out, because I think the scenes with her family are actually a good example of the two of these actors for whatever reason. Maybe the dialogue's better or their performance is better or both. But there's a warmth and an affection there that you don't get in a lot of these other scenes. You could cut a lot of these scenes out, to your point, and replaced it with that scene with her family. And I think the movie would have been better for it.
Hey Fredo, since you're quick on the searching and finding things, I want you to find out how many costume changes Natalie Portman had in this movie.
Okay. While I look for that, it's interesting. It's such a weird cut. They go from the bright and airy, cute dinner scene to fireplace in the middle of the night, and we have to swear our love to one another right here, right now.
I do think like there's an urgency here in this scene in particular that I'm not sure.
There's a disturbance in the force, Dave, and it's in his pants. That's the urgency.
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of that, but I don't know. I mean, we have to commit to one another right now. You know, like you said, that's kind of.
If you are suffering as I am, then tell me now. And it's like, oh God, I wouldn't. Send him.
Dude, that is the perfect way to go about not getting her to say yes to anything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. 911, come get this creeper out of my house.
Now, and here's where I'll defend some of this, not all of it. This is how an awkward teenager who's been chastely raised by a bunch of monks would probably pursue a romance.
Well, but however, okay, so I'm going to get back to what we've talked about with the Rise of Skywalker and with the Last Jedi and stuff like that. My problem with the whole Reylo community is that it's the celebration of a very unhealthy, abusive relationship, and that's the way this one is starting. He's aggressive. He's this is just, I don't know. It's just a bad situation, and so, I don't know. I guess I don't like it. I don't like it. I actually kind of like it that she kind of, right now is like, no, hit the bricks, buddy. We're not doing this. But it's kind of sending a message of, well, he is really dreamy and I really do like him. So I'll forgive the fact that he, killed a bunch of sand people and, you know what I mean? It's,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird that, because she's, I mean, and you kind of get that they're eventually going to have to give in. I mean, they have to give in to their emotions, otherwise we don't get Luke and Leia.
So but however, let's say this. Let's do a how it should have ended type of a thing. What if Anakin and Padme have their weekend at Naboo and they have their one night of awesomeness, but she's like, nope, you are a mess. You're no good for me. And she becomes pregnant. He doesn't know about it. You know what I mean? So all of episode 3 is him, just, she doesn't want anything to do with him, and it makes him more mad, instead of Anakin, hug me like you did on Naboo, that whole thing. It might have been kind of an interesting thing. I mean, but
I think George didn't want to go down that road of the, out of wedlock relations thing. Because this was all very much still at this stage was him. He was very focused on, I'm making movies for kids and families. So, I think he didn't want to go down that road.
So booty calls are not about families?
And the look here that Yoda gives Mace and Mace gives Yoda, that struck me like the Beru and Owen, like he's got too much of his father in him. That's what I'm afraid of. It's like, wait a minute, why are you guys, what are you talking about? Here they look at each other and they know something. At least that's what it's communicating to me. Sorry, I totally took the conversation elsewhere. But it seems like Yoda and Mace know something is up. And again, like you said, Dave, it doesn't get paid off.
Nope. Not really. Oh, but Fredo, I know that you're probably just giving me a hard time, but yeah, I honestly I don't feel that children being born out of wedlock is a particularly big deal. But I know that again, this is at this point a Disneyfied company, and 20 years ago, this was 20 years ago too. Like I think a lot of opinions have shifted on what a traditional family is supposed to look like.
But in the next movie, they have Anakin slaughter children.
Or you mean
and you're concerned about what the kids are going to think about kids being born. I'm being a little facetious with you here. I don't know if you can go down the path of George was, trying to keep this, for kids, because this movie and especially the next movie are not kid movies. Actually, episode 3 was almost R-rated. So
take it up with the country's religious leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's who he was worried about. It was
blowback. And to be fair, I also don't want to dismiss just simply the fact that I do believe that Lucas was locked into telling this great tragedy of these star-crossed lovers, much in the same way as Romeo and Juliet or Dr. Zhivago or any of the great romances that he grew up watching from Hollywood. And while a one night of torrid passion might have gotten the deed done, so to speak, I think he did want to present this idea that Anakin was a good guy and Padme saw through all of his stuff in order to find that good guy and fall in love with him. Likewise, he fell in love with her. And that, unfortunately, the tragedy of their lives was that he was also seeking power while at the same time he was married to her. So, I agree with you, Dave, that there's always going to be an extra real world kind of pressure on him as to kind of how he tells his story. But at the same time, I do believe he had it in him to say, I want to tell this great romance on the backdrop of this great war. And the mistake here is that the great romance doesn't quite measure up. And that's not unfortunate. That's just the reality of it. By the way, I didn't find how many she has for this movie. For all 3 movies, Natalie Portman had 61 costume changes.
Wow.
Apparently, George Lucas had it. Originally, they were only going to have like 9 costumes per movie. And then George Lucas said, no, every time we see her in a different scene, she's got to have something different on. So,
by the way, love this fight between Jango and Obi-Wan. Mm-hmm. I think it's the first time we see like
the rocket shot?
No, like a fist fight in Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a Jedi in his prime facing off against a Mandalorian or presumed Mandalorian in his prime. I mean, this is the stuff of fanboy dreams, and here it is.
Well, and because one has a lightsaber, normally we've seen when we see fights, it's either 2 people with lightsabers or 2 without. This is the first time we see one with a lightsaber, one without, and we find out that both know how to take care of themselves against the other. Well, this is a rather slow fall off the side of the building.
I love the moment. Speaking of this fight, there are a few things about it that are really great, but I love the moment where Obi-Wan is calling for the lightsaber with his hands outstretched, and he gets his arm lassoed and gets pulled along the ground, and then he separates Jango shortly thereafter from his jetpack, and so like they've both been disarmed, and like you said, now it's a fist fight.
Mm-hmm.
I like how Jedi always have to use the Force to open doors. They can't just push a button.
I would be the same way.
If I could, I would. But okay, so about the Mandalorian, all of Jango's, well, first of all, it's kind of funny that we see him bonk his head. I thought that was kind of a that was kind of a fun little thing. I won't fault him for that. But all the things, Rebels actually kind of explains it, that a lot of the things that the Mandalorians have, all their bells and whistles, were to combat the Jedi,
Right.
and to combat what they had. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing.
By the way, as we see Tatooine with Anakin and Padme headed there, this the third different ship design we see for Padme. So
Yeah.
not only different costumes, different ships.
So I will
Her
say,
budget is up.
I think the best piece of acting in this movie is coming up here when Watto realizes that it's Anakin.
Little Annie.
But from a digital character, the facial expressions and the realization that, oh my God, that's Anakin. I just think that is this is just a wonderful moment.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, no. Here's the moment, and it's rather interesting because you almost get a sense that okay, things didn't go as well for Watto once Anakin left.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, speaking as as a former teacher, who I will be sitting there, and one of my students from 25 years ago will come up, and it's like you don't recognize them at all until some little mannerism kicks in. You're like, oh my God, that's you, so I relate to that, because forever your students are, forever that age that, and either Dave's looking at me with and paying attention so closely, or he's frozen up again. But no, and then of course Watto then goes into, oh, you're a Jedi. I want you to do things for me. I've got muscle now,
And then when he calls him, when Anakin checks him back to his mom, and he's got to reveal that he sold her, he's like, oh, wait a minute, he's big now, he could hurt me.
Now there was an interesting thing. Again, it's the or it's like the alternate endings, or how episode 2 should have happened, or something like that. I can't remember what the YouTube channel is. Is that instead of Anakin's mother marrying Owen's father,
Right.
that actually Owen was a Republic fighter, and was a friend of both Obi-Wan and Anakin, not related at all. And so when they leave Luke with Owen and Beru, it's Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, like
Right.
like
Kinda
your
like
uncle Uncle Fredo to Dave's kids. You know what I mean?
right, that kind of thing. Right. It would have been. Put it this way, I think that would have made far more sense and been far more interesting, because not only would have paid off some of the looks and some of the statements from Owen and Beru in episode 4, but also it explains entirely why, having spent almost 18 years raising a kid that's not yours, knowing full well everything evil that came out of that kid's dad, going like, nope, Obi-Wan, I'm not signing up this kid to have a repeat of that.
By the way, the seismic charges
Yep.
that came back then in the Mandalorian, that was, everybody went gaga over those. This was awesome. But no, I mean, Owen could have seen the poor decisions that Anakin made, and
That Obi-Wan made,
and he was like, didn't agree with the Jedi or what, and they have a falling out. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'll watch after the kid, but no, I ain't raising him this way, so.
Or just simply, okay, I know, raise him. Like he could have been along with the plan up until the point that, Luke is old enough that Obi-Wan started thinking, okay, I need to start his training. I'm coming for the kid. And basically tells him, no, get lost. And that would have, because it creates an interesting dynamic for both Owen and Beru, but also, because it's an understandable situation. If he spent years raising this child, has come to love this child like his own, he's not going to want to just go, here you go with this crazy old hermit out in the desert. He's going to teach you mysticism and how to fight, and all along the way is gonna put your life in danger.
And by the way, do you think it's too? I know there's that infamous clip of George Lucas saying it's like poetry; they all kind of rhyme. Do you think it's a bit too on the nose that in this movie, in the second movie of the second trilogy, we get somebody in Boba Fett armor and they're flying through an asteroid field? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Is it
Yeah.
is it a little too on the nose, or it didn't bother me at the time? I probably thought it was cute. I think just time makes you cynical, and you're like, God, couldn't they have done something different?
No,
But
because it creates a certain level of danger. Because it's the whole point. I mean, in real life, asteroid fields are way not this densely packed. They're even rings like Saturn's rings are not this densely packed. There's plenty of space between them. But you create a dynamic where you create tension because not only is Obi-Wan having to dodge Django, he's also having to dodge the asteroids. So
and by the way, as I sit here and look at this Jedi fighter and being annoyed by the droid that obviously does not fit, I can show you a picture. Had my picture taken next to the Jedi Starfighter at Star Wars Celebration 2, and I can show you that there is no room for an astromech droid in that stupid thing. Anyway, welcome back, Dave.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We were talking about how awesome it was when in The Mandalorian when the seismic charge,
Oh, that's such a nice little callback. I like, to your point, like, is it some of these things, are they on the nose? Yeah, but it rhymes, but it does rhyme, and that's one of the reasons we do like Star Wars, is because these things keep popping up at unexpected times, and it's a delight when they do, because it's like that. And I guess that's really the trick to it. It's like, are you expecting to see this thing pop up? And unless you're clairvoyant, you're not expecting to see Obi-Wan engage with Django in a firefight in the middle of an asteroid field. And so when it happens, you're excited to see it, I think.
By the way, when you guys saw this for the first time, did you realize that those things were the Trade Federation?
He says it, but I didn't put two and two together until they started taking off later on.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
It was. I remember being confused by that from the get go, but whatever. And this is where I started actually, cutting between Geonosis and Tatooine a little bit, especially a little bit later when Anakin's looking for the Sand People. It really kind of because they're so similar in in the scenery.
There's one cut in particular.
You don't know where you're at for a couple seconds.
Yeah. You really don't know where you're at, and I'm surprised they didn't catch that and try to fix that in some way. But here's C-3PO. He's back.
Hey!
And
everybody wanted to see him.
And they finished.
And he's got coverings. Yep.
We talked about some of the influences briefly earlier. The Dr. Zhivago style romance. There's so many like Italian setting romances that you could point to that he was trying to draw from during those scenes on Naboo. And here, this is all the Searchers. I mean, like down the line, this is the plot, the way everything's staged and shot. It's just George here, and how much of that is successful versus how much isn't, and it's all very debatable. But I always appreciate the ambition of it, which is we're gonna do the Searchers in space, and it's going to give our characters a little more depth and tragedy, so that we're going to empathize with them more. And I think all of the stuff on Tatooine, I'm not sure I would change many frames, if any.
I guess, and maybe this is something that gets explained in a book or a comic book or elsewhere. I think there was a point where they did kind of start explain that the Tuskens didn't just come upon Shmi and take her. Like they were either hired or told to do so by, I don't know if it was Dooku or somebody else, right?
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I don't know if that was EU or
Right.
yeah, that's been discounted since. But yeah, that was a story element somewhere.
Yeah, because I want to say there was a point where they, because it's left as a question: why did the Tusken Raiders, attack Shmi, who's just coming back with mushrooms by herself? Why did they take her? Why did they have her tied up in a tent in their village? It's not like it's not like they're gonna eat her. It's not like she's got any valuable.
So is this Shadow? Do you think they were purposely trying to make it look like Vader, or is that people just matrixing the shadow cast on the? I know I know in the theater for Episode 1, the theater poster, that was obvious. I mean, this little kid becomes Darth Vader, but here in Attack of the Clones, where you see his silhouette, do you think that was? Are we just matrixing, or was that on purpose? Because it does kind of look like a Vader helmet a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going for that effect exactly, but they were definitely they staged it in such a way that those shadows would be cast. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised either way.
And I don't know if Duel of the Fates fits here.
It doesn't.
I think they needed music for Anakin going through the desert, and I think they just used Duel of the Fates. I don't. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It ratchets up the intensity of that.
Yeah,
scene. And that's the wipe.
Yes.
You're like, oh, okay, we're going to the Sand People. What's going on here? Wait, is this the Sand People? What? Anyway, but yeah, no, that particular piece of music, it like ratchets up the intensity. Like, oh, stuff's about to go down, right? And I think like that's exactly why they did that. But that might be a good example of what Fredo was talking about with George just slicing John Williams's score up to ribbons and just inserting pieces of it willy-nilly wherever he saw fit. And
going with, okay, this bit of music sounds cool.
Yeah. I like it, but then it doesn't pay off. Like I like, oh snap, he's getting mad. This is gonna be bad. And then it ends with him talking to Jawas.
So
like it would have been far more interesting if it would have been like beginning to hear some of the Episode 3 notes that we hear when Anakin starts falling. Like it would have been like not necessarily the whole piece of but sort of kind of like hinting at. But I don't know. I guess that would have been far more interesting to me.
I really like the piece of music when Shmi dies. Mm-hmm. And you see the anger build in that moment. I really like that.
That music's really good.
It seems like we're sneaking around, spying on people.
It seems like we're supposed to be like astonished that they're making battle droids, but it's like the Trade Federation already had a gazillion battle droids in the last movie. Mm-hmm. So.
Also, we actually need this to happen. In Episode 4, we heard about the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan, we knew Obi-Wan and Anakin fought in the Clone Wars, and they were a thing, and we needed them to happen somehow. So all of this is very inevitable for anybody that had watched the first 3 movies. But I kind of like Dooku as a character. Mm-hmm. Again, short shrift because you introduce him too late, and then you have to get rid of him within the first act of Episode 3. This is the problem with structure, with what George has decided to do here, and we could have gotten a lot more with Dooku, and probably he would have been a lot more interesting a character.
Tusken Raider dogs.
Yeah, we saw them in The Mandalorian. Yeah. That was a cue for me in The Mandalorian when I saw those dogs. I'm like, oh, Tuskens are coming.
But yeah, I think you make a good point regarding Dooku. I mean, because he fits the role. I mean, it helps you have Christopher Lee, so
Right.
bonus whoever cast him, obviously. But also, I just think from the standpoint of the kind of role, because he's playing in a much similar nature as Palpatine is doing for the Republic. Dooku is doing the same thing for the Separatists. He's like, oh, I'm the face that's gonna be contrite and genial. And look, I'm helping you fight for your rights. I'm trying to help you be free.
But
So
here's my problem with Dooku though, and it's not really my problem with Dooku, except for I don't know. Have you guys listened to the audiobook about Dooku? It's what Jedi Lost, I think is what it's called. I don't know. I'll have to. It was just released not too long ago, and only an audiobook. Anyway, you get the idea of why he became disenchanted with the Jedi Order through that, but it is not clear in any of these movies or really in the Clone Wars episodes as to why Dooku left the Jedi.
mm,
And I mean, even the Jedi in this movie say he's a political idealist. He's not evil. You know, it's
but he
like
left on good terms. That's what's interesting. He left on terms good enough that they didn't feel like he would be a threat to them.
yeah. So I mean, again, it's just one of those little nitpicky things where it's like there's okay, so why did somebody go to the dark side? I don't know.
You get a little bit more in Master and Apprentice,
Cool.
which is cool. But yeah, we need to hear that story. I think that's a story that a lot
Like I
of
said, you
people.
get a little bit of it in the audiobook. Let me see if I can find out what the name of it is.
Oh, here's the music cue.
Yep, this is the
Yeah,
music.
it's called Dooku Jedi Lost, and it's by Kevin Scott. It's just an audiobook. And so it is kind of it's cool to listen to because all the voices are acted out and everything. And actually, Asajj Ventress is kind of like a key character from this from the get go. Um,
And here comes the massacre of the Sand People.
This is our first hint about Qui-Gon.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because you hear Anakin no. Yep.
Yep. And Yoda presumably is hearing that in this scene, and so he is learning about Qui-Gon and learning about the afterlife.
I love that arc in the Clone Wars, the last season of the well, not the last season, but season 6 of the Clone Wars. That last arc where Yoda's hearing Qui-Gon's voice and he thinks he's going nuts. You know, it's just it's if there's any arc that you watch of the Clone Wars, that's one to watch because it speaks to everything in the at least in the original trilogy of how Force ghosts, why we have Force ghosts, and how you can communicate once you're dead. And see, there's no shoulders on that astromech right now. He can't fit in that starfighter. Anyway, um, you're right. Obi-Wan's always calling home. He's always getting permission. I mean, imagine if every I don't know, army personnel. I mean, yeah, there's certain things you gotta phone in to say, make sure, are we cool on this? But there are certain things where it's like, yeah, okay, we're within our rules of engagement. I would think Obi-Wan,
Well, my thing is this: what is he trying to do? He's trying to send a signal to them to let them know what he's found. Why can't he just get on the ship and fly away? He's found what he came for. He found the bounty hunter, traced him to the separatists. He's trying to file a report instead of, okay, let me get the heck up out of here. They think I'm dead. I'm gonna run out of here, and then I'll go let them know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he thought it is kind of tricky because, like, on the one hand, you'd think like he's hopelessly outmatched. I think Dooku actually says that literally in a few minutes later, but like he's also just, I don't know. Like maybe he thinks, hey, I could get more intel. I'm in planet at this point. I can find out more. I can help us get the jump on them, those kinds of things. But yeah, he could have bailed completely.
So I'm gonna steal from Robot Chicken, and now we can say that he's Little Orphan Annie.
That's bad.
This scene in the garage is great.
Epic.
It's great. The music, you listen to the music, you got the Emperor's theme playing behind him as he gets more and more mad.
The milk.
Again, this is where I believe this guy becomes Darth Vader, and it has nothing to do with Padme.
Right.
Again, it's interesting because if you look at the through line from episode 1, when he's talking about not wanting things to change, and here in this scene where he's talking about how he can fix everything except people.
Now, imagine, if you will, again, going back to my previous argument, imagine, if you will, at this point where he says, I slaughtered them all. I slaughtered them like animals, and not just the men, but the women and the children. And Padme says, you are an evil piece of crap. You stay away from me. I'm leaving this planet. I'm out. Don't talk to me ever again. Then you have an Anakin who, that guy who's, was, unstable to begin with, and now he's a lover scorned, I think that would have been far more interesting in episode 3. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like I said, I think you're right, but I also think that was cast because George wanted to tell the story he's telling us, which is star-crossed lovers. But kind of going back to Dave's idea about episode 1 telling us the way Anakin is he's already on the path that says I want to have the power to keep things the way I want them to be. He's voiced it in episode 1. He's telling you right here in episode 2, and he's gonna continue in episode 3. I
will say, sorry to take on tangent here, because he says I hate them, and then we get Darth Vader's theme. Full bore, and I disagree with it being full bore at that point because he hasn't become Darth Vader yet. There is still a lot of good in Anakin. I think they should have. I think using that to me signals that the character has changed, like permanently changed to Darth, to have like that full statement of Vader's theme. Really, I disagree with it a little bit. I think it could have been implied a little bit more.
Well, here's the thing. It works if you don't add that little moment at the end where he says, I'm a Jedi. I know I'm supposed to be better than this.
Well, I think, again, I
think we're picking nits because that scene is brilliant. And I love it.
Oh, I agree. It's nitpicky. I agree. It's very nitpicky, but I think if it was a little bit more subtle, if you would have just taken like the first half of it, just bum, 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 ba-dum, and that's it. Let it fade into something so that it's there and then it fades away. Not the complete statement of the theme, which I think they do. Now, what if when Rey is burying her lightsaber at the end of Rise of Skywalker, she sees the bones of Shmi? McClunky. Sorry, you're gonna have to McClunky that out.
Well, okay. Quick question, because about 20 years away from this, well, actually no, more like 23 years from this. Owen and Beru, who are on screen right now, also die here. Did Luke bury them there? I'm guessing he did, right?
I don't even know if he buried them.
I think he got the heck out of there.
Did he just leave them there outside by the front door? That'd be cold. I'm guessing
bodies had burned.
I guess, is there like a family like burial plot on the back?
Yeah, but okay, Fredo, if you imagine if he just went home and realized that his surrogate parents were just murdered, I don't think he's probably going to, and I don't think he's probably going to hang around. Probably going to get I don't know. I'd probably get the heck out of there too.
True, true. I guess I'm just saying, like, I find it surprising that
I'm sorry, Obi-Wan's got killer hair in this movie. I just have to say
the mullet is epic, and
the
he
mullet
knows
is
it.
epic.
Although I always laugh because in Latin households, some people put in his picture as a standing for Jesus,
Jesus, yeah.
Yeah.
and wait for their abuelas to notice, and none of them do. Yep. And I think the reason he doesn't get on the ship and fly away is so we can get this moment where he gets captured.
You know, the holograms interacting with people always bother me in Star Wars. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. It's just, it's awkward because it's like, okay, I'm going to turn and talk to Dave. Now I'm going to turn and talk to Fredo. You know, it's, where are the cameras? But oh well. But yeah, Padme's changed clothes again. So that's why she had the suitcase. Nobody else had the suitcase. See, in here, she's we've talked about it before that really episode 3 they ruined her character because here she's, I don't care what you're gonna do. I'm gonna go after Obi-Wan. I'm
You're coming with me.
Yeah, so she's showing her independence. She's showing her strength. And I don't know. I wish we would have gotten more of that in episode 3. Guys, just wait till we do the watch of episode 3. I'm just gonna be drinking whiskey the whole time, and it's like,
well, I do think episode 3's greatest sin again for me is that it kind of drops the ball, whereas episode 2 is concerned, and that was unavoidable. And so that becomes episode 1's greatest sin because episode 1 doesn't get us as far as we need to get. To your point earlier, Fredo, you're not getting to establish these relationships and these characters until here. And then that just limits everything that you're trying to do.
Yeah, like for example, like right now we just got Mas Amedda and Palpatine basically set Jar Jar to be their flunky to give them to introduce the amendment that's going to give him the extraordinary powers to create the army and everything. It's going to lead them towards a dictatorship. But I don't think that, I think that's the most Mas Amedda ever says.
And here we've got Count Dooku telling Obi-Wan everything.
Monologuing?
No, not one thing. Not one thing does he say here is untrue.
No, exactly.
Right.
He tries to manipulate him a little bit with the Qui-Gon stuff, but he's like, the Republic's being controlled by a Dark Lord of the Sith, and we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that, and it's like That's why when when people say it's like we're talking about what's going to happen in this movie or that movie, and when you hear it, like I've heard it on Star Wars Underworld before, they said bad guys in Star Wars tell the truth. It's like it's tough to argue because here it is. It's like he gave his whole hand away, except for who the Dark Lord of the Sith is, but
yeah, it's really sort of mind bending. Even and especially on first watch, we were watching all of this unfold, and you're like, no, he's right, and so everything that he's telling you is right, but the seduction is wrong. It's like, come and join me and be a part of the dark side. And so as a viewer, you're really disarmed. And that makes this scene really effective for me because I'm like, wow, like, I was kind of into this whole thing, and then I wasn't, it's kind of like, the movie Fight Club, where you watch that movie.
Hey, but wait a minute. First rule of Fight Club.
Yeah, well, okay.
You don't talk about Fight Club.
All right, I won't talk about the actual Fight Club. So, like, on first viewing, you're like, oh wow, this is sort of crazy and interesting and kind of cool that these guys are finding an outlet for themselves. This is neat. And then you come to find out the man's crazy. and then and then you go back and you watch it again and you're like, oh my god, so much of this is corrosive and awful, and you don't really see it on first glance. And that's kind of like what that sequence is for me with Dooku. It's like, yeah, it's very seductive.
He's using the truth to tell lies, but
Yeah.
what you mean, he is revealing their plan, knowing full well that Obi-Wan's predisposed to not believe him, but also
Well, let
knowing
me take you into the future about what 23 years when Obi-Wan is telling lies to manipulate Luke. I mean, he's using that whole from a certain point of view. That's why let's talk, it's like when we were talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's like one person's terrorist is another person's liberator. It's like Obi-Wan lies about as much as anyone in episode 4. He's not truthful at all.
And Luke does the same thing with Rey in Last Jedi.
Yeah.
He doesn't tell her the whole truth about what happened with Ben. And she discovers more of the truth, and it ultimately drives a wedge between them.
And I think that goes to kind of a selling point regarding how being honest is vital in a master and apprentice relationship. Or whether it's Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, or Obi-Wan and Anakin, or Yoda and Luke. It's the secrets that kind of eat away at the trust that's built between them. Which is weird, because I think the most honest master-apprentice relationship we get in all of Star Wars is Anakin and Ahsoka.
Probably.
That sequence with Jar Jar and, the pawn sequence where he gives the powers. What did you think?
I
liked it, but I didn't need it either.
You know what I think would have been more effective is if they could have figured out a way to convince Bail Organa to be the one who said, okay, yeah, we've got to, it's kind of like I voted for the war, I voted against the war after I voted for it, type of argument, where it's, to make him kind of a, I've got to right the wrong that I did, I think that would have been kind of a little bit more interesting way to do it. I think the Jar Jar thing was convenient, but it only made people, come up with the Darth Jar Jar argument. So no, I really didn't like it. And the thing I really don't like is this next sequence that's coming up here. This whole droid factory sequence. I
feels like a Disney ride.
This is where you go to the bathroom, everybody. I mean, until they're captured, this is when you can go to the snack bar and, go get your popcorn and your hot dog and whatever, because you ain't missing much on this except for I'm sorry. I just don't like it. It's just bad. And when R2 flew, I was actually, I think I may have groaned.
Well, it calls to, it calls to mind a lot of questions. Like, why didn't he fly in any of the other movies? And, I know maybe his thrusters got damaged or something, but this doesn't bother me. None of this bothers me. I love any excuse to see the Geonosians. They're fascinating to me. I love their culture. I love seeing more of them in the extended universe, and you see Clone Wars and some of the books and stuff. It's just, I love them because they're so imaginatively conceived to me. And, this stuff, I think this stuff's meant to be foreshadowing. And, they take a while to get there, but there's a moment where Anakin has his hand pressed to the ground, and in that moment you're like, he's gonna lose his hand, he's going to lose his hand. And again, it's foreshadowing for later, but it's just, I don't know. I think it's fairly effective in what it tries to do, which is like show that they're in over their heads, give us foreshadowing for the kind of danger they're really in, because Anakin is going to lose his arm. Spoiler alert.
Okay, so maybe I need to edit my previous statement, and all the sequencing with R2 and 3PO I can do without.
You know what?
I get your point with Anakin and Padme. I get that point, but all of this right here, all of this gobbledygook. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say I get a vibe out of this very much like when in Episode 4 when they're caught inside the Death Star. They're trying to find a way out, and they're stuck in the trash compactor, and the stakes are getting amped up because they get trapped in one spot, they get out of it, and they end up in a worse spot, and then they get out of that spot, and all of a sudden they're surrounded, that kind of thing. So yeah, the stuff with R2 and 3PO is kind of take it or leave it, but I think they're trying to harken back to that, and it just, at least it's different because it's not just a fight or a chase.
Right.
And there's not many non-fight, non-chase action sequences in Star Wars.
I know some people are right there with you on the C3PO stuff here, Aaron. I mean, heaven help me. Some of this stuff I chuckle at a little bit with the head and I was like, oh gosh. I don't find it much more offensive, if at all more offensive, than some of the goofy, silly, gaggy humor that we get in some of the other movies.
Return of the Jedi?
Yeah.
Well, now I think Return of the Jedi is when 3PO start. I think they start pushing it a little bit too far. I mean, Empire and A New Hope. I don't think you get any of this. Like, I don't know. This just seems. It was just. I don't know.
No, what's interesting to me maybe is just simply this would have been another opportunity to show kind of Anakin kind of letting go towards the dark side, so to speak. Kind of like we see him in Clone Wars and in Episode 3, that when stuff gets pressed against him and he needs to kind of let loose, so to speak, he's quick to do so. And here he's not. He always feels like he's still very much being good Jedi Padawan Anakin Skywalker.
See, this is Episode 1 stuff right here. I mean, like, he's in over his head. He's still just the Padawan. He's still not, self-actualized. He's the version of Luke that we get in Episode 4 here. Wants to get into adventures and save the day, but he's incapable of really doing it yet. Because here, you just constantly see him in over his head and not having a lot of success. And yeah, I whether you saw him go dark here or whether you saw him be competent, the Jedi that we've been promised, right. I think either of those choices might have been more successful than the guy who lost his lightsaber again.
Yep, because there goes the bottom hilt of the lightsaber.
Oh, Obi-Wan's gonna kill me.
Yeah, he's gonna have to go back to Galaxy's Edge and give me a new one.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to rule out that those sorts of product placements aren't going to eventually start to happen here. It's like, well, I need to go to Doc Condor's.
So it's really interesting. So the Bad Batch is actually getting into this because the big arc or the episode this week, they're starting the conversation of getting rid of clones and using enlisted people. It's going to be far cheaper and everything like that. It's like the things that the Trade Federation had. Yeah, the battle droids were not all that effective, but the droidicas, hugely effective. You know, some of that technology that they just cast to the way. You know,
Yeah, the droidicas were from their first appearance in episode 1. Were
quite
effective.
quite formidable. You know, even the super battle droids, you know, were, you know, I mean, yeah, I mean they're still getting sliced down by Jedi, but it's just kind of interesting how they just kind of cast all that instead of integrating it into their arsenal. It was just nope, shut down all the droids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're done. We don't need them. I heard somebody say that there was an Order 99 or something like that, where it would have been the droids turning on everybody. I don't know. Oh, but I'm sorry. I'm busy staring right now as they make their final proclamations of love.
All right, so
we get across the stars here,
mm-hmm.
and it's nice. And then the arena, and it's awe-inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
However, my favorite line is coming up here, where, you know, we came here to rescue you. Good job. I mean, that's a classic Obi-Wan line as well. Oh, by the way, all right, so Ewan McGregor on Jimmy Kimmel said on May the 4th he filmed a scene with somebody very special for the Obi-Wan series that he hasn't, he said he hasn't been on screen with before.
Now, I didn't hear the last half of that quote. I when he said someone very special, I thought he was talking about Hayden.
No, he said because Jimmy Kimmel asked, you know, he said, anybody you've been on screen with before? He goes, no, I don't think so. Now, I kind of wondered if it's Yoda, because he hasn't really ever been on screen with Yoda. And he was with a puppet in episode 1. He was
floaty chair.
That's all CG, so he wasn't technically, you know how you can, you know, it's from a certain point of view. Anyway, I don't know. It'd be interesting because he, you know, he made a point saying May the 4th. So I just wonder who he filmed the scene with.
The one that makes the most sense is Jimmy Smith's Bail Organa.
He was with him,
right.
and
they did film that in episode 3. Never mind. So yeah, it's like, wait a minute, who could you have acted with that you've not acted with before? That's special.
And okay, and coming up here soon, it's, you know, I've been married to a liberal feminist for 25 years, and I'm like, there is no reason why Padme's shirt needs to get ripped from mid chest down. It's like,
come on now.
Hey, you know, I'll be honest.
It's like somebody trying to tell me one time that, you know, volleyball teams, that the girls wear those shorts because they're compression shorts. And I asked an athletic trainer one time, I said, is that true? And he's like, not in the least bit. You know, it was a bunch of guys sitting around a boardroom sometimes saying, yeah, that's what volleyball shorts should look like. Anyway, so Dave, go ahead.
That was the for me, my theater experience, that was the only unintended laughter moment in the theater, was when that happened, when
her shirt gets ripped off.
Yeah, one of my friends just started busting out laughing because it was so obvious. So obvious a thing. Sidebar, which of the critters here do you like the best? I always like the praying mantis the best.
See, I didn't like the Acklay. The Acklay bothered me, maybe because it looks like a big bug.
The tiger?
Yeah, that's the Nexu. You know, the Reek is the unicorn looking, or the unicorn, well, he is a unicorn. The rhinoceros looking dude. Yeah, the only reason I don't like the Acklay is because it looks like a big bug. It's just creeping me out. Looks like something that would, you know, fly in about, you know, midsummer in New Orleans. You know, I will say that when they kill the Reek, I feel bad. You know, when Django kills him later. Um, the Nexu, I kind of like the Nexu. He just looks cuddly. Um, but you know, this also okay. So as this is also harkening back to all of those, you know, sci-fi, you know, serials on TV when the alien was a close-up of a big bug.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean that's what they're doing here. Even the title of this movie, Attack of the Clones. You know, Lucas was always talking about that. You know, that wanted that serial, that Saturday morning serial type of thing. That's exactly what this, you know, title should have been. Um, but yeah, I mean, this one it is. It's just let's take, you know, a bug and zoom in on it, and you know, that's our alien for the episode.
Well, there's so many influences too, you know.
Gladiator, you know, yeah.
Jason and the Argonauts, and what were you saying?
Movies about gladiators.
Ah, well.
Sorry, I had to go with the airplane reference. There.
Have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
Ben-Hur.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of influences, you know, in this. Now, however, this is an awesome moment. Mace Windu walking down the hall. That was, and you know, the lightsaber to the neck of Django, and he says, "This party's over." That was like the bad MFer moment of that was the Mace Windu I wanted to see.
Mm-hmm. But one thing I never realized, they never gave the names of most of the Jedi Council in the prequels. Like Plo Koon and Ki-Adi-Mundi and Kit Fisto, their names are never actually said in the movie.
Most Star Wars characters, their names, you don't learn their names till you buy their action figure.
This is true. But I just found it interesting. I was watching somebody's video on YouTube, and they're discussing it, something to do with Star Wars, and it was interesting. They mentioned, you know, when Palpatine kills this character, who, by the way, you know it's Kit Fisto because you've seen Clone Wars and you bought the action figure, but no, it's his name's never said in the movie, and it's like, you know, you're right.
So okay, we just saw Mace Windu, you know, fall off a ledge and go falling down, slows his roll until he lands safely down on the ground. So why can't yeah, he had his arm chopped off. Why couldn't he still use the Force to slow his fall out of Palpatine's office? So can Mace Windu still be alive? That's why I still like the idea that he then goes to the Jedi Temple and takes Grogu and splits. And does then a Nick Fury and goes and, you know, he's faked his own death, you know, type of a thing.
Yeah, we still don't know who saved Grogu. I don't know. You may find out.
Yeah. I did laugh when we were discussing earlier today in our group chat about how it would have been interesting if Anakin had picked up, after slicing off Mace's arm, picked him up and just chucked him.
Yeah, I mean, that was my thing, and we're not talking about episode 3 right now, but, you know, that was my thing. I would have liked it instead of, oh, what have I done? Just, you know, I'm tired of your crap, and here, chop off your arm, and I'll chuck you out the window, not the Emperor, you know. But oh well.
Yeah.
There was a YouTube channel I saw the other day. Somebody slowed this whole battle down, and Geonosis slowed it down to like 25% so he could see what's all going on in the background, all the other Jedi, like, and their moves and stuff like that. It's actually really kind of cool. I mean, usually, you know, background is kind of, you know, just kind of fuzzy and you forget about it, but there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. So
now, silly question: why is Jango Fett picking up, like, he sees Mace running for his life and decides to jetpack down there into the middle of the battle to finish him off? Why?
Ego, probably.
Yeah, because it's interesting because he doesn't do it for any other Jedi, but he does it specifically for Mace. I guess does he figure, okay, he's the guy, he's the number one guy, we're gonna take him out? Because there goes his head inside the helmet.
And you see the shadow. Did you guys notice that? The shadow, like his head goes one way and his helmet goes the other.
And what's with Mace's look down there? Like, did he not know that was a dude he just decapitated? Did he think it was a droid of some kind?
Well, there's actually I always see a little bit of evilness in that in his look, and there's always been kind of a talk that Mace is not all on the up and up. I don't know. I do like the Die Jedi dogs, from C-3PO. I do like that, I will say.
I think with Jango coming after Mace, I think it is just personal. Like, he held a lightsaber to his neck. He just took that personally and was like, okay, I'm going to come kill you now.
I see a chance for me to take you out, so I'm taking you out. But, it's interesting. Just, by the way, okay, here, this little moment it goes, aggressive negotiations when Padme and Anakin having it's the only moment you see a little bit of light banter between them that actually kind of sort of feels like it connects.
Where they seem like it's flirtatious, yeah.
Like they're actually into one another. And I'm surprised they don't have enough of those moments because, again, you're trying to build the idea that these people are actually actively falling in love with one another, but yet half of the time they're moping and the other time they're arguing. So anyway, no, it's
They really make R2 into a Swiss Army knife ever since Return of the Jedi, haven't they?
He can do it all.
The only thing he could do in the first two movies is like plug into a socket and, download information. But ever since Return of the Jedi, he's, got a toothpick and a scissors and a nail file and...
So this is where, again, I'll talk about good ideas. This is all a good idea. This is a very good idea, and I like if you had told me again. I came out of the theater.
What do you mean? What do you mean? This for those
the arena battle in general, the Jedi like in their prime, out in the middle of a frickin' Coliseum, battling the hordes of enemies, their lives at stake, which again, it's essentially this fantabulous gladiator jubilee. And so you morph that into what's coming next, which is basically the greatest land battle in the history of the Star Wars universe up to this point.
Right.
And then after that, we're going to give you Yoda in his prime wrecking shop in a lightsaber duel to end all lightsaber duels. I mean, sign me up.
They tell you this, you're into it.
Yeah. If I had been spoiled on all of these details prior to the film coming out, I would have been like, sign me up. And again, when I came out of the theater, I was pretty happy with what I had seen. And it's for moments like this. This stuff is just cool.
And I always did like that shot when everybody just looks up and there's all the Army of the Republic just coming down to rescue them. It's really well done. And like I said, at that moment you're like, okay, now we're into, it's gone from this battle, now it's taking the next step, so it's going to be much bigger. And
now I will say, I don't think it's not much hyperbole to say that the animation that is used from here on out for the clones and that battle you're talking about, Dave, is very similar to the animation that we're seeing in the last season of the Clone Wars and in the Bad Batch, especially the Bad Batch. I mean, it is like, that's what I said. It's like, man, this animation is beautiful and it looks exactly like Episode 2. So I guess that speaks to how it does look cool, but it looks like I'm in a video game from here on out. You know what I mean? That is my critique of it, because like we said before, the technology was there, but it wasn't quite there,
Right.
So that I just,
And
We're
just
talking.
think,
We're
like,
actually Brittany and I were talking about this last night. We're watching Black Panther. It's like the end of Black Panther, that battle between Killmonger and Black Panther down in the train tracks. From there on, I feel like I'm in a video game.
right.
You know, it's like, I know why they had to do the animation, but it's like, you know, it just didn't quite sell me.
Here we go, Death Star
Yeah.
cameo.
Mhm.
That got me super excited. I don't know if you guys noticed it before they started talking about it and drawing attention to it, but
It's
in
just
the,
off to the left there. Yeah.
yeah, in the corner of the screen, you're like, oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
Death Star.
Just in the back there. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's all of this, I think, like, so many of these ideas are genius level to me. And so, like, when you talk about either the conception of what they're trying to achieve on the surface level, the subtext, some of the genesis of just some of the shots, and like what we're trying to achieve here, it's all execution. Like, anybody that wants to, like, flame on anything that happens in the last third of this movie, it's just like, well, I didn't like the execution of it. It's too video gamey, or it's too
However, the camera work is awesome. I love that they just had a zoom like into
The
another gunship. It all looks like the good, you know, it looks like good battle footage. If that sounds horrible, but you know, it's like,
that's what I was gonna say. Did you ever see? There used to be this YouTube channel called The Great War that would told in real time the story of World War One, but they used a lot of the footage that was taken and has been preserved in French National Archives, and a lot of it looks similar. Because again, it's battle footage at a time when recording a battle was not a common occurrence. So therefore, you didn't know that that you weren't supposed to zoom into something, that you didn't know. It's
also,
all. So he's borrowing a lot of that language for this.
you know, the other thing that's kind of cool is like this, and the Clone Wars, series does it as well. But it's like you actually see them use rockets. It's not just lasers.
Mhm.
That's just odd to me, you know. And
it's a change.
it's a big change, and it gave you a much more real world feel, you know. So I think it. Yeah, I love it. The ultimate weapon, and then just
Right. But is it mandatory that they always show you the exhaust shaft? And
aim here.
it's only raised 2 meters. Nobody can hit that.
And again, the visual language, you can kind of understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an interesting shot that comes up where it's like a dust storm and the clone troopers are advancing into it, just shooting blindly, and you're like, okay, that's unique and different. We haven't seen that in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Well, this is the first time we really see a war.
An actual war since Episode 6.
I mean, you have a pretty good space battle, in Return of the Jedi. Well, I guess Empire Strikes Back, the Battle of Hoth. I mean, that's, you know, but this is that on a bunch of steroids.
Mm-hmm. By the way, it's also interesting because this is something that gets touched upon in the Clone Wars, the fact that the Jedi take command over the Grand Army.
Yeah.
Well,
the fact that is that they're warrior monks hired. How was that Qui-Gon said? We're keepers of the peace. Actually, it was Mace that said, so we're keepers of the peace. We're not soldiers.
But I think Mason and Yoda, don't they have a kind of a discussion? It's like, all right, if there's basically, I mean, what I get out of it is like, if there's going to be this army, then we're going to make sure that we're in the thick of it, so it doesn't go bad. But of course, that's Palpatine's plan from the get-go.
Right.
This is their shot you're talking about, Fredo, where they're firing in the dust.
When both armies are in the middle of the dust storm formed by the crashing starship.
So
yeah, and there's a logic to that because the starship gets taken down, crashes into the ground, then this dust storm gets created, and then you see the aftermath.
And by the way, okay, I love this line. You know, Padme says you're gonna need help, and Obi-Wan, not Anakin, says Obi-Wan goes, "There isn't time. Anakin and I can handle this."
yeah, he's had to call
Like,
home every other time, but no, he'll.
you're like, way to be, you know, impulsive about this.
And how did Padme survive that fall?
I always thought that they went back, that they had to go back and add that she didn't just get up, at the blue like she did in the original cut.
But I
She had to go like, oh yeah, I'm okay.
though I do like this interaction between Anakin and Obi-Wan, where this is, I mean, yeah,
Right.
do your job, don't let your personal feelings, get in the way. I mean, this is the most honesty that you've had between the two of them in this entire movie.
This is be a Jedi. You're either gonna be a Jedi, or you're not gonna be a Jedi. But you gotta choose now.
Yeah,
And Yoda senses it all. That's
Yep.
the awesome shot right there.
Bring my ship.
So the interesting thing is, of course, we haven't talked about this. The clones, have, they say that they're completely obedient. They don't talk about having an inhibitor chip in them, as of at this point. But they are completely obedient. That's going to be a topic of discussion in our next episode. Is about we're going to actually be talking with a friend of ours who was a soldier in the Marine Corps, and the whole line from the Bad Batch of good soldiers follow orders, and and also the assimilation of the soldier into a normal life, quote unquote normal life, after the battle is done. So we're going to be talking about all those sorts of things because, I mean, three of us, I guess I'm assuming neither one of you, I haven't asked you specifically, but neither one of you has any military experience. No, I don't either. So I don't even want to pretend to talk about what it's like. So that's why we're having a friend of ours come on. Okay. So we're at a lightsaber duel. I think this was the first time that they actually used a glowy lightsaber to get the lighting effects, is what I've heard. And this, I like how this is all kind of in the dark. Kind of reminds me of Empire. I mean, they all kind of rhyme,
Right. By the way, a quick question. Count Dooku says, "As you can see, my Jedi powers have far exceeded yours." He doesn't tell me he's a Sith Lord. He says, even though he just shot Force Lightning to, shock and drop Anakin, which is clearly not a Jedi power. But that said, the idea of he's still, even though he was so honest up front, he's still not revealing that he's a Sith Lord to Obi-Wan.
Yeah, except he's got a red lightsaber, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like dude, like all the language is saying Sith Lord, Sith Lord, Sith Lord, but he's not willing to admit that bit of the news, even though he's willing to tell that there's one out there. That special effect with the jump always kind of bugged me. But
yeah.
Okay, so this is like has so much potential and it's over in 5 seconds.
Oh, the two lightsabers versus Anakin wielding two lightsabers and he loses it, and right there.
Yep. And like when you talk to the stunt guys, when you see interviews with the stunt guys, and they're like, "How did you solve this fight?" Well, you get rid of one of the lightsabers super quickly. that's how you solve the difficulty involved in choreographing it. And that was the same answer for Grievous with 4 sabers versus
take 2 arms off.
With one, yeah. Well, get rid of the other sabers.
And there you go.
And that's an interesting look from Dooku right there, where he looks sorrowful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and or tired.
He looks like he's regretting. But then, of course, here comes Yoda, and this I don't care what anybody says. I love this scene. especially when he gets his lightsaber and he doesn't just take it off of his belt. He uses the Force to pull the saber into his hand. But first they start off with what they've said is kind of the battle of wizards. This is like Voldemort and, Dumbledore going back and forth. Lucy agrees.
Yeah, I mean, like, this was really heady stuff at the time. I think, like, for most Star Wars fans, it connected and it worked, and it was the kind of thing, like, I'm not sure that we all thought coming into the new trilogy, that we were going to get anything like Yoda doing something like this.
Catches
I'm not
Force
sure.
lightning and throws it back.
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody was necessarily clamoring for this specifically, but it was such a treat because we weren't expecting it.
Well, it's very much like, seeing Boba Fett in The Mandalorian in that episode where he just, all of the bells and whistles come out. It's what everybody had been wanting to see from Boba Fett. They didn't know they wanted it, but they wanted to see it. Yoda fighting everybody knew he was probably the most powerful Jedi. And I remember seeing a bit of this scene at Celebration 2 and the place just going nuts.
The opening night, this is the thing that said, like, oh, we got to go see that again.
Yeah.
Because most of the other stuff, okay, you can kind of make a correlation to something you've seen in a previous movie. This you hadn't seen before, and you're like, I want to see that again because it's over quick.
And it is kind of like Kermit the Frog in Muppet Treasure Island. Not gonna lie, but of course he drops the line that he was Yoda's Padawan, or Yoda drops the line that he was that Dooku was his Padawan.
Can I just say I like this duel more than I like the duel against Sidious for Yoda?
I agree.
This feels far more. I don't know if it's because it's personal in regards to the relationship, or if it's just simply because it's the first time. But I don't know. In some weird way, this feels a lot more like your classic Star Wars duel. Like Luke versus Vader, that kind of thing. Versus when it's Sidious versus Yoda, it's supposed to have gravitas, but it doesn't really connect as well. And I don't know if it's just because Christopher Lee is a classically trained actor who's fenced and dueled in various movies, and Ian McDiarmid had no time for any of that stuff.
And of course, then we get the bookend of Yoda using the Force to summon his cane and hobbling off after all of that. That's why when he says in Empire that the Force gives you all these things, that's what you're seeing here, is that you have this geriatric old Jedi who uses a cane, but with the will of the Force can leap around and go whomping and a whooping.
I'd say I love the design of the Dooku Solar Sailor. It was so unique and different from every other ship.
I found it kind of odd that we didn't see Sidious until here, at the very, very, very end of the movie. Whereas he was more of an overt presence in The Phantom Menace, ironically.
Yeah.
But it makes sense within the context of the story because we don't even meet Dooku until
halfway
the way in.
Yeah. But it also goes to your point earlier regarding, how much of this movie resets everything back up, resets the table, so to speak, because Episode 1 has only tangential connections, has long-term connections, but nothing immediate. So because we'd seen so much of Sidious in Episode 1, I guess they'd get away with it here. As if you didn't know that Count Dooku is a Lord. And you get, I guess the one reveal you get that he's Tyrannus, the guy who hired Jango Fett.
Yeah, I guess this is the reveal of that, isn't it? I guess maybe I put two and two together earlier. That didn't seem to be a big reveal at this point.
Right, because he's been hanging out with him the whole...
Yeah.
last half of the movie. Anyway.
Now, what's interesting here is that the scenery in the background right now, everything is cloudy, everything is hazy, everything's red, dark.
Dusk.
Whereas everything else, when we've seen Coruscant, has been bright blue and clear, really.
Yeah, it's the fall of night. It's dusk falling. So
the shroud of the dark side. Yeah.
I think this is my favorite ending of any of the Star Wars films because it just is so tragic. It's the just we know that everybody here is doomed and they don't.
Let's sing the doom song.
So okay, because I will agree with you. And so again, let's go back to what we were talking about earlier. If it wasn't Jar Jar that gave the Chancellor the power to create the army, but if it was Bail Organa, and here when you see Bail Organa next to Palpatine and Organa, kind of bangs his fist on the ledge. I mean, again, that would have been like, I think it would have been a much more compelling story. Then that explains why, and he, I don't know,
right? Because there's no, I mean, I was gonna say penance or payback for Jar Jar, but nothing happens to Jar Jar after this. The last time we see him is when he's following the procession, the funeral procession. That's it. So even from a standpoint of what happens to Jar Jar, the movies tell you nothing about this.
The music at the ending here is great too, Dave. I mean, not only do you get the Imperial March, but just there's other things going on. The fanfares, then of course going to Across the Stars, for the wedding.
Which even in Naboo, it's like the sun is setting as well. It's interesting. They're not doing this in the middle of the day. It's everybody's coming together, but it's all.
And R2-D2 has seen everything. He's literally seen everything in this saga.
He could write the whole book.
This is like the worst possible thing they could be doing, right? And they're doing it. And you know that. And they're basically dooming the galaxy right here. And it's like, but yet it's presented as them, doing
living in the moment.
It's this beautiful thing, but it's like but now he's going to become Darth Vader.
So so Attack of the Clones, like I said, I know what I've said before, where all the Star Wars movies are like my children, but Episode 2 needs to go back to college and Episode 3 needs to get a job. The more I can watch Episode 2 and not get as upset as when I watch Episode 3. I will say that. So I think actually the prequels rank for me in their order: Episode 1, Episode 2, then Episode 3.
Yeah, I think in introspective, I mean, just looking at it as an overall thing, Episode 2 kind of, it suffers because it's trying to do a whole lot of heavy lifting that should have been done already by Episode 1. And, this should have been all setting up the Clone War. Or if we're starting the Clone War and ending, kind of ending us kind of where we're ending. But it's because it's got to set up Anakin and Padme's relationship. It has to set up who Dooku is. It's got to set up the Separatists. It's got to, it's doing a whole lot of work that it doesn't get any chance to breathe. And so there, it gets hemmed in by.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What Episode 1 and Episode 3 did. Because the thing is, everybody knows the next one's the one that's a payoff. So you don't have any more time to do anything else but tell the beats that you're going to tell. And as I said before, I think George wanted to tell a grand tragic romance.
Yeah,
this was his version.
I think what's interesting about this movie to me is what we've talked about so many times, is that how the Clone Wars as a thing gets so much better justice from the series, the Clone Wars. and also Anakin's development, a lot of the character development, they benefit from this animated series. And I just I feel like that doesn't. I don't think like we're missing the point when we say things like that, because it's very true. But it is interesting that George sort of painted himself into that corner.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about like, well, what would the animated series look like if he had done things differently with the movies? Would we still have gotten this character? Would things still have unfolded in a certain way? And I think like well, my takeaway from that conversation was just like, well, no, it wouldn't have precluded any of that additional development from happening. But the fact that the prequels kind of needed that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any way of just spinning away from that being kind of a feeling. And I love that this movie, and I'll go back to what I said earlier. I love that it's the Sammy Sosa of the movies. It's swinging for the fences. It's home run or bust. The Andres Galarraga of Star Wars movies, but it does miss at times, and the prequels miss at times, and it is what it is, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, we want to thank you guys for sticking with us for a longer episode to watch Attack of the Clones. But so let us know online what you think. Did we miss the mark on anything? Didn't talk about something you want to talk about? What did you think about Attack of the Clones? So, but hit us up on Twitter or on Facebook. We like to be distracted from our day-to-day stuff. But until then, I think we will sign off and say, who dat?
Who dat?
Who dat?
And everybody have a great week.
McConkey.